Good evening, everybody. Eric Foster with Banks and Company, Vice President of Strategy and Research and also Business Development. I wanted to talk about education today. Now, as a parent who also has lived my own educational journey, one thing that I think is critical that we need to consider what we do to measure kids and measure outcomes of students is evolving the way that assessments are done and expanding the totality of what's considered in assessments. And I say that because we have a challenge right now where, from a policy vantage point, most of our statutory law, appropriations funding, administrative rules, and related executive orders at a federal level, at a state level, at a school district level, and with their partners, be it if it's ISDs in Michigan or if it's county level schools in states like Florida or California, where ultimately the problem is we're measuring outcomes based on test scores. Now, here's the challenge with that. Not everybody who is in school and takes tests is going to be good at tests, no matter how smart they are. Both my first ex wife and my second ex wife are brilliant women. Regardless of what happened with us, those are two of the most brilliant women in this country. And both of them were horrible when it came time to take standardized tests. The standardized tests clinched up their comfort and their ability to freely flow with their intelligence and their capacity to answer questions. And so they tested lower than their actual intellectual capacity. Now, for me, people say I know a couple things, and I'm grateful to Jesus that I have a little bit of intelligence. But ultimately, I could take a standardized test after a night of hard partying and an hour of sleep and ace that test in a heartbeat. For whatever reason, me and standardized tests are like a hand and a glove. And I don't need prep. I don't need study. I don't need anything but paper and pencil. And I'm knocking it out the park. So that is not an effective way of measuring the totality of a student and a student's progression, nor is that an effective way of measuring teachers, measuring school districts, managing funding, and related statutory legislation or rules to try to address policy and program and curriculum to try to make things better. Ultimately, at the end of the day, a test by itself is meaningless. So, what is a better way? So, one of the things that we at Banks and Company is we're working with intermediate school districts here in Michigan. We have a couple of clients in that particular space, and we've done work with school districts directly, as well as with parent advocacy organizations over the years. We are helping in that framework of helping our clients understand how to expand the definition of performance, of outcomes, of key performance metrics, and also post high school life outcomes. And so I'm going to give just a little bit of example of where that fits and why I believe we at Banks and Company can be of value and help to your school district, your intermediate school district, your advocacy organization, and this also includes charter, parochial, and private school systems. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, everybody's goal is to produce young adults who are able to come out. And I'm going to go back to the post high school life outcomes, are able to succeed in either going to college and what comes after college with a degree, becoming an entrepreneur, going into the military, going into skilled trades, or going directly into the general workforce and moving up the ranks. But in one of those five lanes, you're creating positive outcomes and you are hopefully setting up that young adult through the 12 years of school plus preschool and childcare to be prepared to take one of those lanes and make something of value with that lane to do and be better than their parents were so they can set up their children for a better outcome than they have reached. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, because we're measuring the test scores, we're failing to make the connections work. And so, beyond those post high school life outcome categories that I mentioned, there are other things that need to be measured to look at a student, and not just the student, but the parent and the parent's involvement and the parent's growth and involvement to be able to determine if you have measurably improved the direction of that child's life. And ultimately, if your district and your school are working or failing. So, one of the things we believe that needs to be a part of the educational space is consideration for additional factors such as attendance, participation in extracurricular activities. If your school or school district is instituted career pathing and tying it to grade levels where you're spending each year immersing students in a particular career segment or industry segment, be it if it is healthcare, and let's say it could be healthcare on the medical side, it can be healthcare another year on the administrative and operations side, it can be health insurance, engineering, bioscience, research, accounting and finance. I mean, there's legal, whatever it is, how they're doing in terms of participation in those activities and growing through whatever content metrics you use to help see if it's connecting with them, but also their actual regular grade point and the content of the classes and what you're putting into the content of the classes, and also parental involvement. These are just a few pieces, but you need to, and we believe, to look at the whole of a child, you need to expand their measurements so you can see quarter by quarter and year over year is their progress, where the challenges are, and then you can apply research-based tools and strategies to address those particular challenge areas. But you can apply them more effectively because instead of looking at a test score, whereas with my first ex-wife, Katrina, or my second ex-wife, Jackie, they may have had a bad test area, let's say in math or in social studies or something like that. And if that was where you thought the application of tools needed to be to help them grow in their actual class work and in other related activities, they actually excelled in, but perhaps their real struggle was in essay development and the whole sort of composition creation. Maybe that was where they had the challenge, but you're applying the solution to the wrong area because you're measuring it based on the test score. That may be an area that they test well in, but in real practical terms is a struggle. And so your ability to look at the totality is critical, but then also tying in the parent because so growing up, I was very blessed to grow up in a household on both my mother's and father's side of the family where I had an abundance of access to opportunity. And what I mean by that is I saw family members who were business owners, nonprofit executives, faith based leaders, elected officials, white collar professionals in the corporate sector, teachers, administrators in education, higher ed, and K through 12. And it wasn't just in my immediate family, but it was in the extended family. It could be fourth and fifth cousins and their parents, where that was still the norm. The extension was clear, and it was across the Foster, the Green, the Howard, the White, the Molet, the Stanton, the Young, the trying to think who were some of the other ones, the Reason Over, et cetera, et cetera. We had so many branches where for us as growing up kids, this was the norm. So it wasn't anything to go over to on the weekend, our third cousin's house and see that the dad is a lawyer, mom might be a principal in a school, the kids are, looking at what they want to do and we're having fun. But when it came time like for dinner, the conversations were very technical and highfalutin, but it was still in a fun way. But it was an abundance of access to opportunity. Seeing people looking like this on a regular basis. I didn't learn until I got to college. And as I now look back at life, even as a child, look back now at this point in my life, looking back at life as a child, being able to see that that wasn't the experience in everybody's household. Unfortunately, a majority of households don't get to see opportunities directly in their family. And so, in the educational space, how are we exposing both the children and the parents, especially if the parents come from a family where that's not been the norm, where there haven't been white collar professionals and business owners and doctors or people that are union leaders or nonprofit leaders or educators, where those positions and those access points of upward mobility or multitude of college degree professionals. That was something across both sectors, my mother's and father's family. But a lot of households, that's not the case. A lot of families, that's not the case. So, what are we doing in schools to actually help bring those exposures of opportunity to address the opportunity poverty issue? I say all this to say that we here at Banks and Company, as a consulting firm in the public policy space, are, I believe, well positioned to help you and your district think differently when it comes to how do you address engaging policymakers in a way that will give you better tools to not only improve the way that you measure real outcomes quarter by quarter for your students, how you tie in and connect the parental engagement and the parental exposure to then the post high school life outcomes, and how many of your students are moving into one of those five positive post high school life outcome tracks and are progressing through that, but starting with the foundation of statutory law, appropriative law, and funding, administrative rules, executive orders, policy implementation that supports all of those tools to ensure that who's coming out is prepared for whatever they would like to do in their life. We are in a position, we believe, to best help you to start to look differently and to communicate this differently to the stakeholders and to communicate this in a proactive fashion, not waiting on school aid budgets, not waiting on curriculum changes in statutory law or in appropriations or overall policy differences to be addressed, but to set the table and move the elected official community towards the direction that's going to bring better outcomes. Because the elected official community is a good community, but they are bombarded with so much, it's difficult for them to, on their own, drive those points for you. But having somebody that can help you distill, catalog, and turn those ideas into policy, into appropriations ask, into administrative rules, executive orders, overall vision points, legislation, and then go shop and sell that to the stakeholders. That is critical. If you don't have that, you're going to struggle to get outcomes and you're going to struggle to get changes in the way funding and policy works to help you do a better job. So we can help you both in that level setting and then also in taking it to the next step. If this makes sense to you, please reach out to us at Banks and Company. Office number is 313-688-4800. My email is eric@bankscompany.us, and our website is www.bankscompany.us. Please reach out. We can be of help to help you improve what you're doing for both your customers, the parents who are the primary customer who decide where their kids are going to school. So they're the primary purchaser of education, and the secondary customer, which is the child who actually is sitting there receiving the education that the parents are purchasing by picking your school. So, once again, reach out to us. We would definitely love to be able to help you. And I think we can definitely help you change the approach so that we can get real results and we can stop sitting in these crisis conversations of saying, why isn't this working? Let's help you make it work.